Hey everybody, this is Rob Anderson. Welcome to the second edition of Swampside Chats. I am Rob Anderson, as I said, running for Congress, House of Representatives, United States House of Representatives in Louisiana's 3rd District, which is southwestern LA. We're here for an hour, 7 p.m. Central Time till 8 p.m. Central Time, to take your questions and to try to give you the best answers that I can. And that's all we're about. And we've been taking questions all day. So now that I've introduced myself, and I assume most of you know who I am anyway, we're going to get right to it. So with me behind the scenes, of course, again, is campaign manager Claire. Say hi.
Hi.
Dave.
Hello.
And our newcomer, Osh, who's just watching for today, but she can say hi.
Hi.
And so they'll be fielding the questions and making sure we proceed in an organized manner. So let's start with the first question. What have we got?
So you had a few questions that came in ahead of time. And by the way, you guys can always send us your questions ahead of time. Maybe you'll be the first one. So your first one was, what is, this is from Mark, and he asked what your position on legalizing marijuana recreationally was.
Okay. Just in case the voice is a little distorted, the question from Mark was, what is my position on cannabis legalization? And thank you for that question, Mark. It's a good softball to start out. And who's followed us for this campaign or last knows that I am 100% for cannabis legalization across the board, medical and recreational. I think it should be descheduled federally from a Schedule 1 narcotic, removing all criminal aspects of it, in conjunction with criminal justice reform and expungement of all nonviolent cannabis offenses that exist to this date. I think federally that's the only common sense thing we can do. It will mean millions, billions saved in our criminal justice system. It will mean a huge flood of tax revenues, and a lot of people have talked about we should do set-asides of that tax revenue specifically to help education systems, and set-asides do work. They've worked at the high school up in Bossier. We can do it down here in Lake Charles, not for cannabis, obviously. It's for casinos in Bossier, but it's the same principles apply. We in Louisiana have already allowed certain individual liberties and freedoms, and there's no reason that people shouldn't be able to engage in things that do not harm others. And then we use that revenue for the betterment of our state and our district. So thanks, Mark.
Sorry, guys. Okay, your second one, and again, this is one that came in early, and it was, how can we reestablish checks and balances in the federal government?
That's awesome. Checks and balances in the federal government. Obviously, we're existing through an unprecedented time of sort of division in our government. So to promote checks and balances in our governments, basically we have to return to checks and balances in our government. Our own congressman, who I'm running against, Higgins, has been a rubber stamp for Trump policies. So basically he has ceded the power. He's given up the power of our congressional seat and handed it to the executive branch. So there's no way you can have a check and balance when you're basically just a yes man for the current administration. Whichever executive is in that seat, Congress is supposed to be an independent entity that acts on behalf of the people. It's individual constituents, 786,000, give or take, depending on population here in the 3rd District alone, all of whom elect a representative to speak for them, not just to speak for Washington, D.C. So to return, I would, of course, represent this district and our interests and what we need a voice for in Washington. And then I think if Congress did that across the board and the Senate started doing that, and we would begin to see 3 separate branches of government again, which is what the founders intended. Thank you for that question. Who was that, by the way? Oh, that was one of the early ones.
Sorry if I mispronounced this. Faisal.
Thank you.
Faisal.
Okay. Thank you, Faisal.
All right. So, okay, we have
lots of questions. There's not going to be any dead air this time.
Not at all. By the way, Tom, not a question, but he said, keep going, Rob. If given, we'll give what I can.
Thank you, Tom.
Your rise has been a joy to watch from the beginning.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So your next question was from, let's see here. From, I want to say Barton.
Barton.
Do you support the idea of forgiving student loan debt? What would you say to someone who suffered through paying back those loans and feels slighted by others not having to do so?
Okay. Excuse me. I'm not sure how well you can hear this, so sometimes you'll hear me repeat the question, but that's merely so that it's for clarity. The question from Barton was, how do I feel about student loan debt forgiveness? And how do I feel when speaking to people who've already paid off their student loans and then watch the next generation benefit? And I'll begin with the first one. The student loan debt obviously is a complicated issue. We have somewhere over $3 trillion. We were trying to find the exact number, but it's growing. It's a huge amount of current student loan debt. And there are several proposals that address it to make it equitable. One of which is put controls on interest, because you can pay on a student loan debt for 10 years and barely scratch the principal. It can't be discharged through bankruptcy like most other debt. So if you begin to treat it like other loans, that alone would make it more equitable. And we don't think, even if the federal government doesn't get in the business of education for all or any programs that may work in other countries or may not here, just addressing what we have now, it is unfair to just launch people out into the world with 1,000% increase in education costs from the time I was young. And we would, a current student going into school, my own son just graduated university and spent $175,000 for a 4-year degree. And we're not talking Harvard. It was a good school, but it's not that kind of good. But there's a huge amount for somebody starting out and supposed to be going out into the workplace and getting a house and a car and a job and becoming a productive American citizen. Yet we saddlebag them with this, and it's unfair debt. It's not fair interest rates, and the debt can't be discharged. So basically, we're putting a ball and chain. We're not encouraging them to succeed. We're encouraging them to fail. So we need to cap the interest rates. We need to be able to discharge those debts through bankruptcy. And after 10 years, some people have proposed, some have said 15, 20, but at any rate, there needs to be an end to these payments so they don't go on forever. And as to how other people feel watching the next generation get benefits, they should feel gratified that they've made a system better for the next generation instead of worse. So that answers that question. Thank you, Barton.
Okay, until we get another one, you also have a comment from Cajun Overcomer who just said, hey.
Hey. Yeah, I see it there on the list. Cajun Overcomer. Hey, y'all. Well, hey, y'all back.
Okay, so
thank you for being with us.
Going with another one that came early. So what will you do to keep the lines of communication open for your constituents once you're in office?
Okay, that's a great question. Again, we have to deal with what we have been living through now and what I would do. And everybody who's ever spoken to me or reached out to me or connected with me knows I'm not hard to get a hold of, and I never have been. And interaction and engagement with voters, constituents, donors, networking, people, other politicians. Being open to lines of communication is what, to me, being a representative is all about. It's not just leading, it's also listening. And, anybody can get a hold of me, and that will not change. Our own incumbent, Clay Higgins, back to him, has held one town hall. And who knows when the last one was? I can't remember. Is there going to be a difference? Well, of course, we would make a written pledge if you want, but for now, early on in the campaign, we're saying an oral pledge right here that we're going to hold a town hall at least once a month. If we're out of district, it'll be a live town hall like this. And if we're in district, there will be an in-person town hall. And whenever Congress is not in session, I'm going to be in district because this is where the people are. And that's how you talk to them. People talk about bipartisanship and cooperation. How do you do that? Well, I listen to people and I let people tell me what they need, not tell them what they need. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Okay, this one kind of...
Oh, they put up a little data for me there. This is just an add-on. September 2017 was the last Clay Higgins town hall, by the way. So, you're working on 2.5 years. So, I think we can do better. Obviously.
Yeah.
My last town hall is happening as you're watching.
You've already had more town halls in the
right.
last term than Clay Higgins has.
Right. I've already.
Which is one.
Right.
So-
And we've had two. This is our second Swampside Chat. So I think I'm already ahead.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So this one
Vote
kinda
for me in
goes-
November.
Sorry, this one kind of goes with your last one on on the student loan question. But would you consider creating a bill that would waive all student debt for honorably discharged veterans, or create a bill that would give vets tuition exemptions?
Absolutely yes to both. If you didn't hear that, when we were talking about student loan debt forgiveness, one portion of that, no matter what else gets decided, and legislation does get bogged down, no matter the best intentions. But would one aspect of that be that veterans get student loans discharged, and what was the other half? Forgiveness, student loan forgiveness.
Yeah, well, tuition exemptions.
Tuition exemptions
vets,
for
yeah.
veterans, and I say absolutely yes. I don't think we can do enough for our veterans. Anybody who signs up and offers to serve this country and puts their lives at risk and puts their families, into a military lifestyle. Let's be fair. I was a Navy brat, and I lived like 10 places before I was 2 years old. So, Navy families they do feel that they're part of the Navy. They're all part of that lifestyle. It is a huge sacrifice for anybody who serves us. So yes, absolutely. I would love tuition exemptions as motivations for people to stay in the service, or even if they leave, as a reward for service. And of course, I don't see our veterans, we will already have problems navigating PTSD and healthcare, having student loan forgiveness after the fact. They've served their country. There's not enough that we can do for them. Thanks for the question.
Okay, so this one.
I probably should have looked at that before.
And we are still on.
We are still live. There's a couple comments that I'll go ahead and read out while you get your question. Cajun Overcomer says, I can't stand clay. Well, thank you. Gene says, education should be accessible to everyone. Nice to hear you, Rob. Thank you. And yes, I agree. And we are going to address more on education as it comes up. We have a lot of exciting plans and a lot of approaches, common sense approaches. Outstanding. I like you more. Thank you. You've gained national attention. They like you more, and happy carnival. Amen. Louisiana chat. We're coming up on Mardi Gras.
Okay, so this one is again, guys, send in your questions, but for now we're just going to keep going with ones that are sent in advance. So this is about the military. It comes from Nick, and he asked, given the absurdity of the money spent on the military endeavors and the out-of-control debt, what steps can be taken to curtail these issues? Also, how would you redirect funds from the military to benefit all Americans?
Okay, that's a great question. In case you didn't hear it clearly, what can we do to address the out of control, as some perceive it, out of control military spending as a percentage of national debt, and what can we do to correct it? And one thing that we've been discussing for quite a while, and I feel that most Americans agree, the opposition a lot of times likes to drum up fear. And that's what they're pushing as their campaign points. We have to be afraid. So right now, the largest military power in the world, and it has been for decades, is the United States. We are the last standing military superpower. There are other economic superpowers. And part of that reason is that we spend so much of our people and resources in wars that are not directly threatening the United States. However, they're protecting interests overseas. So I think we can shave down from the number one military expenditure in the world to the number one military expenditure in the world and still save hundreds of billions of dollars, because we need American troops to protect the United States. We have become a net exporter of oil very recently. So we no longer rely on foreign oil. And of course, with a boost towards renewables, we'll have even less reliance on foreign oil. Now, granted, the United States is not going to get off the oil standard anytime soon, but there's no reason not to utilize additions to that are already existing technology, obviously solar technology and wind turbines and wave turbines and geothermal and any number of renewables that do exist. And we can keep producing our own oil, which then allows our military to come at home to defend us. We have 10, for example, when examining the military, looking at our Navy, of which my father was part of the branch. So I have great respect for the Navy, but we have 10 supercarrier fleets. Each fleet that we have, each U.S. aircraft like the USS Bush, can handle a nation conflict by itself. And we have 10 of those. We could essentially be at war with the entire world at the same time with existing spending. And there isn't that kind of danger out there. There's always going to be adversarial nations. There's always going to be people disputing over borders. But we have been overspending so much that it's at the expense of our own citizens. We don't spend on infrastructure. We don't spend on clean air, clean water. We don't spend on our own healthcare. What we spend on is military that is only sold to you by fear. And I think we need to really stop and look at that. We've become number one in war since the military industrial complex started, which Eisenhower warned us about. And we no longer are number one in healthcare and manufacturing and infrastructure. We used to lead all those categories, and now the rest of the world has passed us by. Math scores, name anything, but military, we're still number one. So we can still be number one and yet tone it down to a realistic level, especially now that we export our own oil. So it's a complex issue. That's a complex answer, but I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to tell you. So thank you for the question. Again, Tasha says, hi, Rob. Elpis from Twitter, ELPIS. I don't know what that means, but hi back, whoever you are from Twitter. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us tonight.
That's their handle.
Oh, okay.
So your next one, tricky little question. But,
tricky question.
Alex asked, how do you plan to appeal to the people who idolize macho personalities or toxic masculinity in this age of anti-intellectualism?
I don't know how you would combat that because I don't understand how that would apply in this election. The incumbent I run against is a cartoon character. If you've ever actually met our congressman, he's a very meek and mild, bordering on an elderly gentleman. He's polite, introspective. And what I hear about people based on his YouTube videos is a completely different animal than reality. So I'm not competing with a cartoon character. What you see is what you get. He can say whatever he wants in those videos because they were about a different subject. It's like electing a reality TV star. I don't know who would do that. So that's how I would compete with it. I don't. I am a real person. I had real jobs. Everything about me is authentic. And that's the way it's going to continue to be, whether I work out of Washington, D.C. or here. I hope that answers it.
Maybe
turn off the cartoon. How's that?
People who feel that, who idolize macho personalities might think that something that real men do is like pay their child support and stuff. Just a thought.
And there is that.
Okay, so the next one is, how do you feel about the FCC's rollback of net neutrality regulations, and how can Congress act on net neutrality?
Well, I think it's become clear that Congress does need to pass legislation to the FCC. That was one of the early regulations that came out from this administration. Obviously pro-business, but there should be no way that small businesses and the individuals can be throttled by competitors. Net neutrality needs to be guaranteed, and I think we just need to pass a law, take it out of the FCC's hands. They've shown that they can be a political instrument and just deregulate at will, where Google someday could throttle Netflix just because they felt like it if they're sharing bandwidth. You need regulation in the sense that it should be equal and free for all. And net neutrality was very confusing when it came out. The wording of the bill, people thought they were voting for liberty, when instead they're voting for, being at the mercy of providers themselves, rather than what the FCC is supposed to do, which is guarantee a regulated, fair market. Our own Clay Higgins voted to allow ISPs to throttle content, which then allows those ISPs to steal and sell your personal data and personal info. So,
okay. All right. So your next one was about Coastal restoration and erosion. Louisiana is really on the front lines of climate change, whether you call it climate change or you call it
Coastal erosion, sure.
or whether those are one and the same. What can we do? What can the state of Louisiana do, or what can Congress do to help combat the effects of climate change and slow coastal erosion?
Especially since we just went over this in a long session, researching all the impacts of coastal erosion is another very complex issue, especially here in Louisiana, because we have had saltwater intrusion, and we've been losing square miles of Louisiana coastline for many years, and it's sped up and slowed down. And there's so many different plans to address it, none of which ever actually address it. One of the aspects that we look at that we could affect from Congress is that we would enforce through federal mandate, or smacking somebody on the palm, even enforce the state to when they make contracts with oil and gas companies for all these man-made canals they make in our freshwater basins. Once they're finished with the site, to make them fill those canals back in. That's one. We have 10,000 open miles of artificial canal on the Gulf side of Louisiana, facing the ocean. And all of this messes with natural drainage and the natural flow of water. So making oil and gas companies fill in their own canals would be one way we could immediately and practically address the eroding coast. And then we have to deal with silt deposits, saltwater intrusion, the Atchafalaya basin, and the issue with that in the Mississippi River going around Morgan City. It's a very complex issue, but the first thing we can do is hold oil companies accountable, make them fill in the mess they already did, which causes all our water to go places it shouldn't be.
Just as a clarification to that, and this isn't like super commonly known, but it actually is in those contracts that the state has with the oil companies that they have to fill in the canal.
Right. This is already a contract.
That the state doesn't enforce that. And how would they? We don't have. Our state is not as powerful as oil companies.
Right. It's not as powerful as FEMA or the Army Corps of Engineers, right. The ones who actually draw up the maps of our elevation and show where water's supposed to go. These are federal agencies that would have authority to tell these contracts need to be enforced.
Yeah. So the next question was, what do you see as the future of the Affordable Care Act? Would you have voted to repeal it? If not, how can we improve it?
Okay. I'm going to solve healthcare for you in the next 30 seconds, so pay attention. That was a joke, obviously. Again, another very complex issue. One, the Affordable Care Act, everybody acts like there was a before and after. We had, there are elements of healthcare now that are crappy, and there were elements of healthcare that were crappy before. So repealing the Affordable Care Act doesn't take us back to zero. It basically just means a whole lot of people, 50,000 in our district alone, would immediately lose coverage if you repealed the Affordable Care Act. So immediately there's the human price to pay. We know this. These numbers are known. So what we would love to see and push towards is, of course, the public option for healthcare, where you force insurance companies to compete for the government regulated but not government owned pool, wherein we offer health insurance to individuals, or they can opt out and go shop with Blue Cross Blue Shield directly if they want. But the government, of course, having access to all the American people, can then collectively bargain on our behalf, and especially with the drug companies, and get those costs under control. And then obviously that competition will drive prices down. It's free market, but it's just regulation. And that's I think the best goal for healthcare is to get the best prices we can, because pharmaceutical companies aren't losing money on drugs. They're actually making tremendous profits off of human beings every day. And I don't think healthcare, I actually do believe it's a human right. And that's another philosophical debate for another day. But I do believe that it's covered in the Bill of Rights.
So your next one, and I think this is in reference to the state legislature, but it It says Louisiana won't do anything about equal pay. Can Congress? I assume they're talking about the, Louisiana state legislatures try to pass an equal pay bill year after year. That's always dies in the labor committee. So I think the question is, should Congress and can Congress do something about it, and what would that be?
Well, the very concept of equal pay, as I understand it, seems to be that equal pay for equal work should be the law of the land.
That sounds like equal pay.
Which I can't see why we wouldn't do that. So that's one I understand that when they get down to particulars of the bill, they argue about things. But yes, I think there should be equal pay. Locally, I think it's the Paycheck Fairness Act.
It's a piece of federal legislation.
Oh, that's federal. Okay. Basically, we want wrapped in there the Paycheck Fairness Act. One of the key elements of it is the non-retaliation, that if somebody does, like a whistleblower, does make a complaint to their employer that somebody else working the same job is making more. Right now, you can't in Louisiana even legally ask an employer if, about somebody else's pay because of their skewed view of privacy. But the meaning being that even a woman, even asking whether a man doing the same job hired at the same time is paid more or less, could be fired just for asking. So the Paycheck Fairness Act would address that it can be self-regulating. Employees can ask to make sure that they are, paid accordingly, commensurately with others, regardless of sex or gender. Excuse me. And that the employer cannot retaliate against them merely for the question. So that, yes, we back that. Sorry if that meandered.
I really wish you guys would send in some questions, but I guess I'm gonna.
A lot of people saying hello.
The one sent in before. So, how do we balance the threats of climate change while Louisiana is so heavily invested in oil and gas industry? And as oil diminishes, how do we keep the population employed?
Okay, both of those questions kind of lead to the same answer. Is then Louisiana has to, regardless of who it elects to Congress, it's merely that we have a plan to address it, has to invest in other industries, has to give, if they're going to give, we need a level playing field. If you give all these exemptions to oil and gas, of course, they're going to stay, but you're not giving exemptions to other industry that wants to come in, not to mention they don't have the three elements they want to build new business. Well, actually, there's four. A population with good education, good healthcare, and good infrastructure, and stability. Now, as we know, under Bobby Jindal, our rating was very unstable. And as we've gone on, and now in our fifth year of John Bell Edwards, the government has become very stable. So it's very favorable for new industry. So now if we make sure we have a push for education and infrastructure, for good roads, good new bridges, for all kinds of shipping, clean water, air, all these focuses for a district will make it more desirable to business. And that's when you want to bring in alternate industry like tech, more renewable energies to compete for the, on a level playing field with the current and is in energy industry, which answers its own question is if oil and gas production starts to diminish, you do have other industries. The sun isn't going to go out for 5 billion years. So we've got a pretty good timeline on that. So push for alternatives, push for new, and then you don't have to worry about someday the oil faucet runs out and then everybody's scrambling for, a small piece of whatever pie remains. We need to plan for the future legislatively and, actually legislatively is what I'm running for. So legislatively and personally, you need to psych yourself up and get ready to work in something that won't kill you of cancer at the age of 40.
It's fair. Okay. So with all of the data on recreational and medical marijuana, how will you, this is 2 parts, convince your partners in Congress to vote to legalize or decriminalize it? And also, how would you like to see the revenues produced distributed? What do you use that money for?
Right. Well, we've touched on that. And I would like to say, I'll answer that. I'll try to do it in order. 1, how to convince your partners. Well, most of Congress these days, and actually most of the American public, I think it's plus 70%, but it could even be higher, doesn't think cannabis should be illegal, which means they think it should be legal. So getting a caucus together that would be pro-cannabis is a matter of writing the correct piece of legislation, which there's several bills that are already been filed in the House. But I mean, even if you created an all new one, you'd want to basically make sure that it's descheduled as a Schedule 1 narcotic, take it out of the category of heroin, and also to make sure it goes hand in hand with criminal justice reform and reinvestment. We could put money directly earmarked as part of cannabis legalization into public education, into more public defenders, which is a problem that's rarely touched upon in criminal justice reform. The average, I think, in Louisiana is 7 minutes that a public defender gets to spend per defendant, and there's no way they can get a fair trial when their lawyers only known them for a grand total of 7 minutes before you stand in front of a judge. So more public defenders, more rehabilitation facilities for other more harmful drugs that do have rehabilitation programs, and of course anti-recidivism to get all these expunged records. Let's get them back into the workforce, to clear the records of meaningless past crimes, make sure they have a high school diploma or access to trade schools. Let's get them into the workforce. Let's stop stigmatizing and ending people's lives because of a weed. It's just ridiculous. But a plan that addresses all of that. And when we say, we want to legalize marijuana, it's like, like weed for everybody, token smoke. I mean, it's just a commodity like any other that's been stigmatized through decades of misinformation. It's a product like alcohol that can be taxed and used and regulated and for the benefit of society as a whole. And let me throw as an aside, has never caused a single death, asterisk for allergic reactions notwithstanding.
This one wasn't actually next, but it kind of goes with that subject. And it was, do you support the expungement of criminal records for nonviolent charges related to marijuana?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is a continuation. A lot of times people are arrested that it is just a small, small amount of marijuana, or what they call personal use, or a joint or a pipe or paraphernalia, and there's no other accompanying charge to it. Yet they now are on the school to prison pipeline. They have now committed a crime and they're in the system, and therefore they either fall behind the school or they get jailed, and the whole thing dominoes, all starting from this meaningless charge. So expungement isn't just saying, well, okay, you're free to go now, welcome back out into the world and welcome to poverty. They've lost a portion of their lives to unjust and immoral laws. And, any part of legalization needs to take revenues from that to steer at, let's, take an eraser to the chalkboard of all the mistakes we've made. And at least on this one, we can directly control. Now, if you're, arrested with a bale of weed in your trunk and 10 keys of cocaine and a few, submachine guns and some pit bulls gnawing on, human trafficking victims, yeah, you're probably going to still face additional charges. So we're not going to expunge those. But
yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that's grounds for arrest.
Yeah, you should probably be arrested for all that, but only because you allowed the pit bulls to endanger themselves by snorting the cocaine.
Okay. Let's not get crazy now. Okay, so
they want to be amused too.
The next one is about this area. Well, it's about Lafayette in general, and it's that it says local conservatism is high in Lafayette. I assume that means Lafayette is conservative, and even higher in the outskirts. How can you overcome the mindset of not voting for a Democrat? In other words, how can you get Republicans to vote?
Oh, okay. We begin by rejecting the premise. I hate to categorize anybody based on, this area is red or this is blue, no matter what the demographic said. All campaigning is meeting people. It's face to face. You walk up to somebody or you knock on the door and you shake their hand and you talk about your issues, and you're talking about their local issues, what the drainage is in their area, and how their local school is doing. Have they had any new parks? Got major potholes. Everybody's got individual issues. The ideologies of party war politics are immaterial to a campaign. We're not out there selling a brand or a label. We're just talking about what we can do for the people of this district. And, being a representative, you don't go up and tell people what you're going to do for them. You ask them what they need, what they would like to see in their representative, or what they want from their government. And you believe me, it doesn't matter what political party somebody belongs to. If your representative walks up to you and says, "What do you need? What can I do for you?" That is my job. That resonates all across party platforms or ideologies. And so I don't see any difference in, campaigning in Lafayette or in Cameron Parish or in DeQuincy or New Iberia. It's you got to go meet the people and you got to go ask them what they need. So thank you.
This one's from Brock. He said Louisiana lost 28,921 residents, very specific, between 2016 and 2017. I will note that there was a big flood, but still. There was a flood, but still. Do you have any plans to slow the loss and bring jobs back to the state? So I think this is about like the brain drain.
Yeah, it does sound like a reference to the brain drain. The specific question was at 921. Is that what it was? Yeah. 28,921 people left in a certain years period. And as Claire, happened to mention from the background, yes. Excuse me, we had pizza before. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude, but grass. So yes, there was a specific incidents that probably spurred. But when we generally talk about the brain drain, that actually reversed last year, 2018-19. Not reversed all, but by percentage points was less bad than the year before. And again, that goes back to stuff we were talking about. If you make Louisiana, especially our district, our plan is to put the focus on increased education, increased healthcare, and increased infrastructure, and add it to the stability brought by the current government now that our credit rating is restored as a statewide entity, and the budget is balanced and more people are on health care than ever before. That is what appeals to business. Stability. Their local governments, they know what they're getting into. They can push for longer contracts when they negotiate with ITEP and such like. And stability is what attracts businesses. They don't want to go to unstable regions. It's not a more attractive tax rate or not. It's about, are they going to be able to find educated, healthy workers who can do the job, whatever it is, tech, alternative energies, people who are trained, new welding, facilities or welding schools for that matter, if you're pushing for the 2-year trade programs added on to education like we are. Education doesn't just mean going off and learning philosophy at Harvard. It could just be an apprenticeship program to get into plumbing, which is the road to the middle class. So stability is the main thing. And, and our governor's kind of given that. And it's given us this opportunity to bring our platform to you, where we say, if we push for these other things, we're really going to have innovative, fresh growth in this district that actually makes the air better because we're polluting it less, and it makes the water cleaner because we're pushing for upgrades to 100-year-old, infrastructure, public Wi-Fi, so that the kid doesn't have to go down to the library to do the homework, especially in rural areas. It just, everybody's life is a little bit better if we have education, healthcare, and infrastructure. That's why we keep harping on that. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, the next one is from Dana, and she asked, what are your thoughts about voting for the lesser of two evils? Is it better to have a voting record that includes tacit support of something you're against, or to not vote at all?
Okay. Guess you didn't hear that. The question was, how do I feel about voting for the lesser of two evils, or is it better not to vote? Well, our answer is going to be, you are always worse off by not participating in an imperfect system and therefore abdicating your power than you are participating in an imperfect system and then being on the ground floor of making it better. You are the change you seek. There's all kinds of aphorisms but walking away and abdicating your position, you're giving up what little power you do have. As a collective, we are the power. Everybody who shows up, history is made by those who show up. That's somebody else's line from it's become an aphorism. And, no one candidate can ever be a perfect fit for everything, but somebody who represents their district and tries to speak for all and not just some is what I'm aiming for. 94% of our campaign donations are from individual small donors. We just are here because we want to be the people's voice. We're not here to speak for, 5 big companies, down in Moss Bluff, and God bless them. I'm glad we have industry, but we want more, and we want better industry for the people of Louisiana, better wages, better healthcare. We can always do better.
Okay, the next one from Califredcation.
Califredcation, what's up?
Yeah, okay. I'm not trying to be difficult by asking this.
Oh, no.
However, why is the threat of unfamiliar immigrants still such a powerful Republican talking point when we're losing tens of thousands of people a year?
Okay, that's a good one, and that's one we've talked about many a time, and I touched on it before. The GOP's position, and perhaps the Democrats do it too, but in the specific one we're talking about, raising fear of specific issues to drive public concern. So, as you know, in this country, you are more likely to be killed by a vending machine than you are by a terrorist attack. The numbers say so. Yet I have never seen Fox News drone on night after night after night about vending machines. So they do want you to fear something. And so when they push for the fear of the unknown, they're merely trying to sell you a product of fear. They're trying to make you afraid of something so that you will vote, so that they can have unlimited war powers and, all kinds of money for a problem that really doesn't exist. The number one cause of death in the United States is cardiovascular. I was trying to think heart health. I forget how it's counted, but it's cardiovascular. Your heart stopping. That's the number one cause of death. And it's by far, it's not even close. And yet you don't hear on the news all day, every day of eat more salads and don't eat hamburgers, which is good because that would be a very annoying news program. I happen to like hamburgers, but nevertheless, they're not pushing data at you. They're pushing a position to sell a product. So to answer the original actual question and not my take on their marketing, is we need to upgrade and update the immigrant visa programs. We need to probably take more money away from the border walls and put it into more immigrant judges. And stop, violating Geneva Convention when people cross our borders. We're not saying to let illegals come in and run rampant or whatever the hell, Higgins is going to accuse us of. That's not it at all. We want border security. We want our sovereign borders protected. But that doesn't give us carte blanche to, create a felony out of a misdemeanor. We are a nation of immigrants, built on it. And when people tell me that, well, my grandparents came here illegally, it's like, well, until 1922, there weren't any laws. You basically showed up and you root, hog, or die. So we do have to catch up with this wave of immigrants, which has been happening for quite a few years now. Ever since in the 80s, under Ronald Reagan, we basically destroyed Central America and destabilized the entire region and created generations of refugees. And here they are coming to our border. And now we're shocked that there's all these refugees that we created by interfering in foreign governments. And so when you go back to the root, they don't want to own up to the problem. They just want to call it something else. These are all drug dealers and rapists coming across the border, which is the dumbest freaking thing I've ever heard. But, look at the source of who said it. So immigration is a complex issue, and nobody's saying we want to open border. Well, some people are, but not me. But nevertheless, people can be treated humanely, and we can bring them into our country and get them registered. Update your database across the world in seconds. You can look and learn and vet every candidate who comes across, schedule them for an immigration hearing, and get them on the rolls as taxpayers, productive American citizens. Immigrants tend to make the country better. Every data set says so. It's a non-issue that's been turned into an issue because, Trump, like how build that wall sounded.
So this is actually the last one that you had sent in beforehand. And so I will say if anybody has a question,
this could be
to send it in now.
Yeah, otherwise this is the last one.
Before we're going to cut it. But it was, how do you plan on dealing with incumbent House members that would be threatened by your plans and your anti-corporate /grassroots/progressive views? So
Well,
I guess how you work across the aisle, right?
Right. How you work across the aisle, or you'd have to work across the aisle both ways, because, I'm more progressive than Clay Higgins, but so is Attila the Hun. But, I'm somewhat to the right of, other considered progressive candidates. It's a fine line. I'm called a centrist, a corporatist, a progressive. I don't know. We're just trying to do what's best for the people of the 3rd District of Louisiana. That's all we're about. So our issues are not the same as they are in, San Francisco or Boise, Idaho. Everywhere is different. So how are we going to work across the aisle? We're all people. The same way you knock on doors and engage with voters and listen to their problems. You talk to fellow lawmakers and say, hey, I got this piece of legislation. I think it's good for this. How would it affect your district? How can we work together to get this done? And it was for the nation as a whole. If you're selling an actual ideology based on facts and data and, human rights and the Constitution, it's not a hard sell. I don't consider it to be that hard at all, because I can listen to somebody else's point of view without immediately demonizing if they don't exactly agree with every word I say. And I expect the same consideration in return. And, I've worked construction sites, managed a few companies, owned a couple more. And everybody on that job site, they're all on a team trying to do a certain thing, and everybody has a different way of talking. But in the end, as long as you're getting the house built and your foundation's good, you're going to end up with a finished product. And it's a team effort. It doesn't matter who's individually put the window in or put the door on. And that's the end of that metaphor. I've gone a little off the rails, but you get the point. We can work together. I'm not running on, a national party's ideology. I'm running as Rob Anderson.
Yes, so that was the last one you had, and there's a comment there that I'm not going to read because it's profane, but it's nice.
You're a fucking badass amigo. Thank you, brother.
Thank you for reading that out loud.
Be sure and screen cap that and save it for opposition research. I use the F word.
Oh, God. So I'll let you wrap it up.
All right. If we have no more questions for tonight, thank you very much for being here with us. I enjoy doing it. We had a lot of great questions sent in tonight. A lot of them came through Facebook, by the way, which we do have monitored, that came in early. On Twitter, I don't know if we're doing it live or, too much the interaction. So we're going to get better at this. When we hope to be getting more questions on a live base, but at any rate, we do want all your questions, and we're going to try to address them all. So at any rate, thank you very much. Rob Anderson, signing off from Broussard, running for Congress in the 3rd District of Louisiana in 2020. Obviously, this November 3rd. Don't forget to vote. Obviously, as you know, we have a jungle primary in this state. We don't have a midsummer primary. There is qualifying, which will be in July, where we go down to Baton Rouge and sign officially that we're running. But we're already run with the FEC, so that's just a state formality that we do. We're in it to win it up to November 3rd. And check us out at robandersonforcongress.com or on Twitter, at Rob Anderson 2018. That's the big one. Or it's the same, I think, on Facebook at Rob Anderson 2018. It's Rob Anderson for Louisiana. Anyway, thank you very much. To make it through the jungle, join the Rob mob. Thank you, Sparrowhawk. Yes, indeed. And we'll talk to you again. And I'm going to keep talking until somebody tells me how to end stream. There's the button. Thank you very much. Good night, all. Hold on, we're still live because it's still asking me if you